Chapter 5. Over time, Mr. Earnshaw's health began to decline. Once robust and energetic, his vitality deserted him abruptly, and as he took to sitting by the fireplace, his temper grew increasingly irritable. The slightest provocation upset him, and any perceived challenge to his authority nearly drove him to fits. This was particularly evident when anyone tried to mistreat or dominate his favourite, Heathcliff. Mr. Earnshaw was fiercely protective, convinced that because he favoured Heathcliff, everyone else despised him and sought to harm him. This was detrimental to the boy, as the more compassionate among us avoided distressing the master by indulging his favouritism, which only fed Heathcliff's pride and dark moods. Yet, this indulgence became somewhat necessary. On several occasions, Hindley's scornful behaviour in his father's presence incited such fury in the older man that he would grab his stick, trembling with rage at his inability to strike him. Eventually, our curate, who supplemented his income by teaching the young Lintons and Earnshaws and tending his own small farm, suggested that Hindley be sent to college. Mr. Earnshaw agreed, albeit reluctantly, lamenting, "Hindley is good for nothing, and will never prosper wherever he goes." I earnestly hoped this would bring us some peace. It pained me to see the master distressed by the consequences of his own kindness. I believed his discontent stemmed from family discord, as he insisted it did. Though truly, sir, it was his failing health that was to blame. We might have managed reasonably well, if not for two individuals, Miss Cathy and Joseph, the servant. You likely saw him up there. He was, and probably still is, the most tiresome, self-righteous Pharisee ever to scour the Bible, claiming the promises for himself and tossing the curses at his neighbours. With his knack for sermonizing and pious talk, he managed to make a significant impression on Mr. Earnshaw. And as the master grew weaker, Joseph's influence only increased. He was relentless in pestering him about spiritual matters and insisted on strict discipline for his children. He encouraged Earnshaw to view Hindley as a lost cause, and night after night he would grumble out a litany of complaints against Heathcliff and Catherine, always careful to exploit Earnshaw's frailty by placing the heaviest blame on her. Cathy, indeed, had ways about her unlike any child I had ever seen. She tested our patience countless times each day. From the moment she came downstairs until she went to bed, there was never a moment's peace from her mischief. Her spirits were perpetually high, her tongue constantly in motion, singing, laughing, and teasing anyone who wouldn't join in. She was a wild, mischievous girl, but she had the most beautiful eyes, the sweetest smile, and the lightest step in the parish. In truth, I don't think she meant any harm, for when she made you cry in earnest, it was rare that she wouldn't stay with you, insisting on quiet so she could comfort you. She was far too attached to Heathcliff. The harshest punishment we could devise was to keep her away from him. Yet, she was often scolded more than any of us because of him. In her play, she delighted in taking on the role of a little mistress, freely using her hands and issuing commands to her companions. She tried the same with me, but I refused to tolerate her slaps and orders, making my stance clear. Mr. Earnshaw was not one to appreciate jokes from his children. He had always been stern and serious with them. Catherine, for her part, couldn't grasp why her father was more irritable and less patient in his illness than he had been in his healthier days. His irritable reprimands sparked in her a mischievous pleasure in provoking him. She was never happier than when we were all scolding her at once, and she stood there, defiant, with a bold, cheeky expression and quick retorts. She would mock Joseph's religious curses, tease me, and do exactly what her father despised most, demonstrating how her feigned insolence, which he took as genuine, held more sway over Heathcliff than his own kindness did. The boy would follow her commands in anything, but only obeyed his when it suited him. After a day of mischief, she would sometimes come to him at night, seeking reconciliation. "No, Cathy," the old man would say, "I cannot love you. You're worse than your brother. Go, say your prayers, child, and ask God's forgiveness. I fear your mother and I will regret ever raising you." At first, this made her cry, but being continually rebuffed hardened her, saying she would laugh if I suggested she apologize and ask for forgiveness. Eventually, the time came when Mr. Earnshaw's earthly troubles came to an end. He passed away quietly in his chair one October evening, seated by the fireside. A strong wind howled around the house, roaring through the chimney. It sounded wild and tempestuous, yet the air was not cold, and we were all together. I was a little away from the hearth, absorbed in my knitting, while Joseph read his Bible near the table, for the servants usually gathered in the house then after their work was done. Miss Cathy had been unwell, which kept her calm. She leaned against her father's knee, and Heathcliff lay on the floor with his head in her lap. I recalled the master before he drifted into a doze, gently stroking her lovely hair. It delighted him to see her so gentle, and saying, "Why can't you always be a good girl, Cathy?" She turned her face up to his, laughed, and replied, "Why can't you always be a good man, father?" But when she noticed him becoming upset again, she kissed his hand and offered to sing him to sleep. She began singing softly until his fingers slipped from hers and his head drooped onto his chest. Then I told her to hush and not move, fearing she might wake him. We all remained as quiet as mice for a full half-hour, and would have continued longer. But Joseph, having finished his chapter, rose and said he must wake the master for prayers in bed. He stepped forward, called him by name, and touched his shoulder, but he didn't stir. So Joseph took the candle and looked at him. I sensed something was amiss as he set down the light, and grabbing the children by an arm each, he whispered for them to head upstairs quietly. They could pray alone that evening. He had something to attend to. "I'll say good night to father first," Catherine declared, wrapping her arms around his neck before we could stop her. The moment she realized her loss, she cried out, "Oh, he's dead. Heathcliff, he's dead." Their cries were heart-wrenching. I joined in their lament, my own voice rising in sorrow. But Joseph interrupted, questioning why we would wail so over a saint now in heaven. He instructed me to grab my cloak and hurry to Gimmerton for the doctor and the parson. I couldn't see what good they'd do now, but I went anyway, braving the wind and rain, and returned with the doctor. The parson promised to come by morning. Leaving Joseph to handle the explanations, I rushed to the children's room. Their door was slightly open, and though it was past midnight, they hadn't gone to bed. They were calmer, needing no comfort from me. The little ones were consoling each other with thoughts more profound than any I could offer. No parson, could paint heaven as beautifully as they did in their innocent conversation. As I sobbed and listened, I couldn't help but wish we were all safely there together.